I want you to start by picturing the Amazon rainforest. Just, close your eyes for a second. What comes to mind? For most of us, it's probably this chaotic, endless green ocean. You're seeing vines tangling around massive trees, maybe a jaguar stalking through the underbrush.
The air thick with humidity.
Exactly. The sound of insects. It's the ultimate image of nature, in its rawest, wildest form. A place where humans are just visitors, or where they live in small nomadic bands that leave barely a scratch.
And that is the image we have been sold for centuries, really. It's the myth of the pristine wilderness. It's this romantic, but ultimately false idea that the Amazon is a green hell.
A green hell, right.
Yeah, a place where complex civilization, the kind that builds monuments, that builds cities, could never really take root. The environment was just too hostile, too overwhelming to allow it.
Exactly. But today, on this deep dive, we are going to completely shatter that image. We're taking a trip to the state of Amapá in northern Brazil, right up near the border with French Guiana, and we're going to a specific hilltop overlooking the Rego Grande River. Because if you stand on that hill, you don't see chaos. You see geometry. You see order. Standing in a perfect circle are 127 massive blocks of granite.
And some of them are standing up to 4 meters high.
That's about 13 feet.
13 feet.
Weighing up to 4 tons each.
Which is just incredible to think about.
And they're arranged with such astronomical precision that on the winter solstice, they capture the sun in a way that, it rivals the engineering of Neolithic Europe.
It absolutely does.
We're talking about the Rego Grande site, colloquially known as the Amazon Stonehenge. Today is January 22nd, 2026, and we are diving deep into the lost astronomers of the rainforest. And the mission for this deep dive is, it's pretty clear. We aren't just looking at a pile of rocks.
No, we are dismantling a myth that has stood for over 100 years.
The counterfeit paradise.
That's the one. The idea that the Amazon looks lush, but is actually an agricultural desert, incapable of supporting complex society. The stones at Rego Grande, along with the incredible Lidar discoveries from just the last 2 years in Ecuador and Brazil.
Oh, we have to talk about those.
They tell a completely different story. They tell us that the Amazon wasn't an empty wilderness. It was a garden, a built environment, and it was home to engineers who watched the stars.
So let's unpack this, because when I first saw the photos of this place, it's officially called the Parque Archaeologico do Solsticio, the Solstice Archaeological Park. It honestly looked like someone had photoshopped a chunk of the British Isles into the middle of the tropics.
It's a striking image, isn't it?
It is. It's this grassy hill and then these jagged leaning stones. It just looks impossible, given what we were all taught in school.
It is striking. And what's fascinating is that for a long time, it was hiding in plain sight. This isn't something that was buried 10 feet underground. These are monoliths standing tall.
Right. And the rediscovery story is such a classic example of how we see what we want to see. You've got this cattle rancher named Leilson Camelo da Silva. This is back in the 1990s.
Right.
He's out there clearing trees, slash and burn style, trying to make some grazing land for his herd. The fire clears the brush, and suddenly he's bumping into these giant rocks.
And to his credit, he didn't just bulldoze them or ignore them. He realized there was a pattern.
He knew something was up.
He did. He actually mentioned later that he had seen them as early as the 1960s, but left them alone because he felt the place was sacred. He sensed the weight of history there. He became a self-appointed guardian of the site before the archaeologists officially moved in.
But here's the kicker. He wasn't actually the first to find them, was he? This is where the history of science gets a little frustrating.
No, not by a long shot. The naturalist Emilio Goldi actually noted the site way, way back in 1895.
1895.
Then you had Kurt Niemuendager, a really famous German-Brazilian anthropologist, reporting on these stone alignments in the 1920s. He wrote it down. He told the scientific community, hey, there is a megalithic structure here. But scientific community, they just sort of shrugged.
Why? How do you ignore a Stonehenge in the Amazon? That seems like headline news, even in the 1920s.
Because it didn't fit the paradigm.
Yeah.
You have to remember, archaeology is as much about the bias of the observer as it is about what's in the ground. At the time, the prevailing wisdom, the absolute dogma, was that Amazonian indigenous people were simple, nomadic hunter-gatherers, full stop. So if you certainly believe that, and then someone comes along and tells you, hey, I found a massive megalithic observatory that would require organized labor and complex engineering.
You dismiss it.
You dismiss it. You assume it's a natural formation of rocks, or you assume the observer's exaggerated. It couldn't be true, so it wasn't.
So it was just forgotten, ignored for decades.
Yeah, pretty much. It wasn't until 2005 and 2006 when archaeologists Mariana Petri Cabral and Joan Darcy de Mora Saldana from the Institute of Scientific and Technological Research of Amapa, the IEPA, started systematic excavations that the world finally paid attention.
And thank goodness they did, because what they found changed the timeline completely. We're talking about a site that dates back between 1,000 and 2,000 years ago.
Correct. Radiocarbon dating places the occupation roughly between 500 and 2,000 years before present. So this civilization was flourishing centuries before European conquest. This wasn't a post-colonial imitation. This was an indigenous innovation.
Okay, let's get into the structure itself. You mentioned 127 stones. This isn't just a random scattering of boulders on a hill.
Far from it. The stones are arranged in a circle that's about 30 meters in diameter, and they're made of granite, which is significant.
Why granite?
Because the hill itself is laterite,
Yeah.
a reddish, clay-like soil. That means the granite isn't from right there. It had to be brought in. And granite is dense, heavy rock.
So they're moving 4-ton blocks in a rainforest environment without the wheel, without draft animals like horses or oxen. That's a logistical nightmare.
It implies a massive amount of human labor. And not just brute force, but coordinated force. You need levers, rollers, ropes. You need a path cleared through the forest. You need someone directing the traffic.
A project manager.
A project manager, a foreman, a priest. Someone was in charge. And while the stones are irregular in shape, they aren't the neatly hewn rectangular blocks you see at the British Stonehenge. Their placement is incredibly intentional.
And that intentionality brings us to the Stonehenge comparison. I know experts usually roll their eyes when the media slaps Stonehenge on anything with old rocks.
They do, yeah.
But in this case, the nickname is actually pointing to a specific function, right? It's not just about looks.
It is. The nickname works because, like the British Stonehenge, Rego Grande is an astronomical observatory. It is a machine for tracking time.
Specifically the winter solstice, December 21st.
Yes. In the northern hemisphere, that's the shortest day of the year. In the southern hemisphere where this is, it's technically the summer solstice, the longest day. But given the location is so near the equator, the mechanics are what really matter. The builders at Rego Grande set this up so that on that specific day, the sun aligns perfectly with specific stones.
I was reading about the shadow phenomenon, and it blew my mind. It's not just that the sun rises over a rock. It's way more precise than that. It's almost like a camera mechanism.
It's fascinating engineering. There is one specific block that has an angle, an aperture, a hole, essentially. As the sun reaches its zenith on the solstice, the angle of the rock allows the sun to pass right through this hole.
And what happens?
The shadow of the block effectively disappears. Or, more accurately, the light beams through to a very specific point on the ground. It's not just a shadow caster or a gnomon like you'd see on a sundial. It's a spot dial.
A spot dial. Okay, let's unpack that concept for the listener, because I think most of us are used to the idea of a stick casting a shadow to tell time.
Right. A standard sundial is a gnomon. It casts a shadow, and you read the position of the darkness. A spot dial uses an opening to control a beam of light. You read the light itself.
So it's the opposite.
In a way, yes. Think of a pinhole camera or a spotlight on a stage. You are manipulating the light to hit a specific target at a specific moment.
So on December 21st, the spotlight hits the mark.
Exactly. It's very similar to the roof box at Newgrange in Ireland. Newgrange is this massive passage tomb, thousands of years old. And above the entrance, there's a specially engineered box. On the winter solstice, for just about 17 minutes, a ray of light shoots through that box and illuminates the chamber floor deep inside the mound.
So Rego Grande is using that same principle, controlling light to mark a specific critical moment in the annual cycle.
Precisely. And it's amazing to see the same solution invented by completely different cultures, thousands of miles apart. You see it in Chaco Canyon in the U.S. too, with the sun daggers, where spirals of light hit these petroglyphs carved into the rock.
It speaks to a universal human drive, doesn't it? We need to create order out of the chaos of the sky. We need to track celestial mechanics.
We do. But in the Amazon, the why is very specific. I mean, why do you need a calendar in a place that doesn't have a harsh winter?
Right. It's not like they needed to know when the snow was coming to avoid freezing to death.
No snow. But the Amazon has a rhythm that is just as deadly if you ignore it. The rainy season versus the dry season. In the tropics, the climate can be extremely volatile. The rivers can rise and fall dramatically, sometimes by meters in a short period.
Okay.
Knowing exactly when the solstice occurs, knowing the turn of the year, is a fundamental survival tool. It tells you when to plant your crops, when the fish will migrate, when the river levels will change, when to harvest. It's agricultural synchronization.
So it's a farmer's almanac made of 4-ton granite blocks.
In a practical sense, yes, absolutely. But we can't separate the practical from the spiritual. In almost every ancient culture, the sun is associated with life, with power. The solstice, the stopping of the sun in the sky, is often associated with the supernatural or the transition between worlds. It's a liminal moment, a sacred time.
Which brings us to the more somber aspect of Rego Grande. It wasn't just a place to look at the sky, it was also a place for the dead.
That's right. The excavations revealed that this stone circle is also a cemetery. They found ceramic burial urns buried near the stones. This wasn't just a workspace for astronomers. It was sacred ground, a necropolis.
And these aren't just plain pots, are they? These are Aristé culture ceramics. I looked up some pictures of these, and they are intense, they have personality.
They are very distinctive. The Aristé culture, which flourished in this region, created urns with anthropomorphic features. We're talking about faces, arms, and legs modeled in relief right onto the clay.
So the urns look like people.
The urns themselves are personified. They have body painting motifs, polychrome designs, reds, blacks, whites. It's as if the vessel for the remains becomes a new body for the ancestor.
So you're burying your ancestors in jars that look like people right next to a machine that tracks the movement of the sun. That feels like a very deliberate, very powerful statement.
It suggests the synthesis of functions,
Yeah.
They're connecting the cycle of the stars, which is eternal and repetitive, with the cycle of human life and death. The sun dies and is reborn at the solstice. Perhaps they believe their ancestors did the same. It anchors the dead to the cosmic order.
There is some debate, though, regarding the science of it, isn't there? I read some quotes from physicists who are a bit skeptical about calling it a pure observatory in the modern sense.
Yes, and that nuance is really important. We have to be careful not to project our own worldview onto the past. Jarita Holbrook, who's a physicist and cultural astronomer, made a great point. She said something like, "It takes more than a circle of standing stones to get to a Stonehenge."
What does she mean by that?
Her point is that we shouldn't rush to project our modern Western idea of a scientific observatory, like a lab with telescopes, onto this site. Its purpose was likely much more integrated into their cosmology and religion.
And John McKim-Malville, a solar physicist, pointed out the irregularity of the stones. He thinks it points to animism.
Right. In many animistic belief systems, objects in nature, rocks, trees, rivers, have souls or spirits. Malville suggests that the stones weren't shaped into perfect rectangles because the builders wanted to preserve the soul of the rock.
So they weren't just moving granite, they were moving beings, spirits.
That's the idea. They were placing these powerful stone spirits in a circle to commune with the spirit of the sun and the spirits of the ancestors. So while it functions as a calendar, its primary purpose might have been ritualistic, a place where all these different forces converged.
But whether it was for science, religion, or both, the one thing we can't deny is the sheer effort involved. You don't move 4-ton granite blocks for miles just for fun. And this is where the story gets really interesting for me, because the existence of this site implies a social structure that wasn't supposed to exist there.
Exactly. This brings us to the social implications. To build Rego Grande, you need a few things. You need a quarry, and as we said, the granite likely came from kilometers away. You need transport methods, but most importantly, you need a society organized enough to spare the labor.
Right. You need someone to say, hey, 100 of you, stop fishing, stop hunting, we're going to drag this giant rock up a hill today. And you need to be able to feed those people while they do it.
Precisely. You need surplus food. You need planners or architects to design it. You need a hierarchy of priests, astronomers, builders, leaders. This completely fundamentally contradicts the standard model of tropical forest cultures that dominated anthropology for the 20th century.
Let's talk about that model, because for a long time there was this very influential idea called the counterfeit paradise. It sounds like a bad movie title, but it was a serious scientific theory.
Oh, it was the dominant theory.
Yeah.
Championed by two very famous archaeologists, Betty Meggers and Clifford Evans, in the mid-20th century. Their argument was basically a form of environmental determinism.
Meaning the environment determines the culture.
Exactly. They looked at the Amazonian soil, which in many places is acidic and nutrient poor, the yellow Leda soils, and they said, look, this soil is terrible. You can't do intensive agriculture here. Therefore, you can't support large, dense populations. Therefore, Amazonian societies were forever stuck as small, egalitarian, nomadic bands.
So, under that theory, if you found something complex like Rego Grande, it had to be an anomaly, a mistake.
Or they argued it was a devolution. The idea was that maybe some advanced people from the Andes came down into the jungle, tried to build something, and then basically died out or faded away because the forest couldn't support them. They viewed the Amazon as a trap that limited human potential. They saw the lush vegetation as a counterfeit promise of fertility. But Rego Grande is just one nail in the coffin of that theory. In the last few years, specifically with the Lidar revolution, we have essentially built a whole new coffin.
Lidar, that's the laser scanning technology that can see through the forest canopy, right? It strips away the vegetation and the data and just shows you the ground.
Yes, it stands for light detection and ranging. And what it has revealed in 2024 and 2025 is just mind-boggling. We aren't just finding stone circles, we are finding cities.
The discoveries in the Upano Valley in Ecuador, that was a massive headline recently.
Truly massive. Lidar revealed a network of lost megacities in the Upano Valley, dating back 2,500 years. We're talking about streets, plazas, ceremonial platforms, and thousands of earthen mounds all connected by roads.
And grid.
A gridded civilization that was completely hidden by the canopy. This wasn't a collection of small villages. This was dense urbanism on a scale no one thought possible there.
And closer to our stone circle, over in Santarém in Brazil,
The Aldeia and Porto sites. Lidar and excavations showed large pre-colonial villages, some over 120 hectares in size, separated by seasonal lakes. They show evidence of sophisticated urban planning. They show that people weren't just surviving in the forest, they were managing it. They were shaping the hydrology, the layout of their settlements, the ecology.
which brings us back to the soil problem. If the counterfeit paradise theory was based on the idea that the soil was bad, how did they feed these cities? How did they sustain the workers who built the Amazon Stonehenge?
They made better soil. This is the miracle of terra preta, or dark earth.
I love this stuff. It's basically, it's man-made super dirt.
It is. It's anthropogenic soil. It was created by intentionally composting organic waste, charcoal, pottery shards, and bone over generations. The charcoal is the key ingredient. It's what we now call biochar.
And what does that do?
It completely transforms that acidic yellow Amazonian clay. It turns it into rich, black, fertile loam that stays fertile for centuries. It acts like a sponge for nutrients and microorganisms. It basically inoculates the soil with life.
So the counterfeit paradise theory was wrong because it assumed the environment was a static, fixed variable. It didn't account for the fact that humans could engineer the environment to suit their needs.
Exactly. We're moving toward what some archaeologists call a garden city concept. We now understand that the Amazon is not a pristine, untouched wilderness. Much of it is a cultivated landscape or a cultural parkland. The distribution of fruit trees, the nut trees, the soil itself, much of what we think of as wild nature is actually a legacy of thousands of years of indigenous gardening and engineering.
It's like walking into an overgrown botanical garden and thinking it's a jungle just because the gardeners haven't been there in 500 years.
That is a perfect analogy. And this brings us right up to the present day, because the story of Rego Grande isn't just about ancient history. It's rewriting the narrative right now. In 2026, we are finding new pieces of this massive puzzle every year.
Let's talk about that discovery that happened just last year in 2025. This was in Macapá, the capital of Amapá.
Yes, this was a fantastic find. During the construction of a new residential complex called Park Residence, construction workers hit an archaeological jackpot.
What did they find?
They found colonial coins, Dutch pipes, and indigenous artifacts that predate the city's official founding in 1758.
What does that tell us, that combination of artifacts?
It confirms that the northern Amazon, this region near the mouth of the river and the Guianas, was a massive hub of commercial activity and trade long before the official Portuguese colonial narrative says it was. The Aristé culture didn't just vanish into the jungle. Their descendants were part of a dynamic, connected world that was trading with the Dutch, the French, and other indigenous groups.
It makes the Amazon Stonehenge feel less like a lonely, isolated outpost and more like a cathedral in a bustling region. It connects the dots.
Exactly. It changes the map in our heads. We stop seeing isolated tribes and start seeing a geopolitical network.
And this connects to something really relevant for us today. I mean, we're looking at the COP30 climate conference coming up in Belém. Climate change is the biggest story on the planet. And suddenly, these ancient stones and this dark earth are part of that conversation.
They have to be. Researchers like Gino Meadow have been pointing this out for years. The builders of Rego Grande possessed what we might now call an ecological consciousness. They merged monumental expression like giant stone circles with sustainable land management.
They didn't clear-cut the forest to build their civilization. They built with the forest. They intensified it. They made it more productive.
And that is the lesson. The terra preta, the agroforestry, the management of water, these are ancient technologies that increase carbon stocks. They make the forest more resilient to drought and fire. As we face the climate crisis, we're realizing that the primitive methods of the Amazonians were actually far more advanced in terms of sustainability than anything industrial society has produced.
It's incredible. We're looking for these high-tech carbon capture solutions.
And the Amazonians solved it with charcoal and composting 2,000 years ago. The knowledge is right there.
It's not just about artifacts or soil samples, though. It's also about the people who are still there, the Palikir people.
Yes, the Palikir and also the Wayana people are the living descendants of these traditions. The Aristé culture didn't just disappear, it evolved. You can see the motifs from those 1,000-year-old burial urns in modern Palikir designs, but even more importantly, you can hear it in their stories.
The oral traditions.
The Palikir have stories about great droughts and massive wars that changed their world. And when paleoclimatologists look at the climate data from ice cores and sediment layers, they see something called a medieval climatic anomaly, a period of intense dryness right around 900 to 1100 AD. The stories match the science.
Wow, that gave me chills. We dig up dirt to find out what happened, and the people living there have been telling us the story the whole time. We just weren't listening.
It's a concept called reading the tracks of the ancestors. Archaeology often focuses on objects, the things left behind. But for the indigenous communities, history is written in the landscape itself. The river bends, the hills, the groves of trees. Rego Grande is a chapter in the book they have been memorizing for a millennium.
So where does this all leave us? We started with a pile of rocks on a hill, and we've ended up questioning our entire understanding of civilization in the Americas.
And that's the power of a site like Rego Grande. It stands as a permanent challenge to the pristine forest myth. It proves that the tropical environment did not stop humans from reaching for the stars. It proves they had geometry, astronomy, hierarchy, and incredible art.
And it proves they had a society that was complex, populous, and incredibly sustainably adapted to its environment.
It forces us to be humble. We often judge past civilizations by their stone monuments, pyramids, temples, castles, and because the Amazonia is built mostly with wood and earth, which rot away, we assume they were primitive. But Rego Grande is the exception that proves the rule. The stone circle survived to catch our attention, but the real monument was the civilization that surrounded it.
It makes you wonder what else is out there, hidden under the canopy, waiting for a Lidar scan or a rancher to stumble upon it.
Well, here's a provocative thought to leave you with. If a site as massive as the Amazon Stonehenge, 127 stones, 4 tons each, could be hidden in plain sight, or dismissed as natural rocks for a century, what does that say about our ability to recognize civilization when it looks different from our own?
That is a big question. It challenges our very definition of what civilization looks like.
Think about this. We look for stone temples like the Mayans built. But perhaps the greatest monument of Amazonian civilization isn't a building at all.
What is it then?
It's the forest itself. The biodiversity, the concentration of useful plants, the dark earth under our feet. Maybe when we look at a wild Amazonian landscape, we aren't looking at nature, we are looking at a garden, whose gardeners we just forgot to acknowledge.
A garden that's been growing for thousands of years, that is something to mull over next time you see a picture of the wild Amazon.
Indeed. It changes the view entirely.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and keep looking closer. You never know what's hiding in plain sight.